My name is Lily Allen, and what I'm about to share with you changed my life forever. On February 12th, 2025, I died. It was for exactly 7 minutes and 46 seconds, a time long enough to completely alter everything I thought I knew about life, death, and God. I wasn't just floating in the dark. I crossed over to a place more real than anything I had ever experienced on earth. It was there that I met Jesus Christ. He revealed something to me, something powerful, hidden for centuries, and untapped. Strength within the Black community. This power has always existed, but it's been suppressed. What he showed me was shocking, but the message he gave me wasn't just for me. It's for the world. It was a cold morning on February 12th, 2025, when I woke up to the sound of my alarm blaring at 6:30 a.m. The sky outside was gray, and a light dusting of snow covered the ground. I had been feeling off for a while, tired, stressed, disconnected from everything around me. But that day, I had an important presentation at work, and I couldn't afford to mess it up. I went through my usual morning routine: coffee, a quick shower, and a rushed breakfast. As I put on my coat, I felt this strange tightness in my chest. It wasn't exactly pain, but more like a warning, something telling me that something was about to happen. I brushed it off, thinking it was just nerves. The drive to work was uneventful until I reached the intersection of Pine Street and Fifth Avenue. The light was green, so I continued through. And then, out of nowhere, I saw it. A red truck speeding through the intersection. My heart jumped into my throat. There was no time to react. The truck slammed into the side of my car. The deafening sound of metal crunching and glass shattering filled my ears as my body was jerked violently. Then, everything stopped. I couldn't feel anything anymore. No pain, no sound, no fear. Just silence. My vision blurred, and it felt like I was floating. I saw my body slumped over the steering wheel, blood dripping from my forehead. I should have panicked, but instead, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. I could see everything around me in crystal clarity. I watched as a man pulled out his phone, dialing for help. I saw the paramedics rushing toward my car, pulling me out and laying me on the ground. Someone was doing CPR, shouting for me to breathe, but I didn't feel connected to any of it. That's when I felt the pull. It was like an invisible force gently guiding me upward. I didn't resist. I couldn't, even if I tried. I was being taken somewhere that I instinctively knew wasn't Earth anymore. The moment I left my body, I knew something extraordinary was happening. It wasn't a dream or a hallucination. It was real, more real than anything I had ever experienced on Earth. I was weightless, drifting through a space that didn't feel like a place at all. There was no sky, no ground, just a soft golden glow surrounding me. I could still see my body below me, lying on the pavement while the paramedics worked frantically. But I wasn't scared. There was no pain, no fear, only calmness and acceptance. I wasn't attached to my body anymore. It felt like I was watching a movie about someone else's life. Then, I felt the pull again. It was gentle but firm, like an invisible hand guiding me upward. I didn't resist it. I couldn't. It was as if my soul already knew where it was supposed to go. Suddenly, I was surrounded by darkness. Not terrifying darkness, but a quiet, peaceful emptiness. And then, in the distance, I saw a light. It wasn't just bright. It was alive. The light pulsed with warmth, love, and energy. As I moved toward the light, I felt an overwhelming sense of love pouring over me. It wasn't just love. It was acceptance, peace, and the sense that I was finally where I truly belonged. As I got closer to the light, I began to hear something. Music, but not music like we know it. It was harmonious and pure, like 1,000 voices singing in perfect unity. It was so beautiful. I couldn't find words for it. Tears began streaming down my face, except I didn't have a face anymore. I was no longer in a physical body, but I still felt every emotion deeply. Then, the light began to change. A figure started to emerge from it. At first, I thought it was an angel, but as the figure stepped closer, I realized it was him, Jesus Christ. He was tall, wearing a robe of white so bright it shimmered. His eyes held eternity, deep brown, yet filled with galaxies of light. When he smiled at me, I felt every fear every pain, every regret, dissolve. He radiated power, but not in a way that intimidated me. It was comforting. "Lily," he said, his voice deep and steady, yet filled with warmth, "there is something you must know." I tried to speak, but I didn't need to. He could hear my thoughts. He reached out his hand toward me, and when I took it, I was flooded with knowledge. Visions flashed through my mind. I knew that I was about to learn something profound, something that would change everything. After Jesus took my hand, everything around me dissolved into light. I was being pulled through a tunnel, but it wasn't like any tunnel on earth. It was made of light and energy, swirling and pulsing with life. I could feel the presence of others around me, beings of light, singing in harmony. The tunnel seemed endless, but I wasn't afraid. The deeper I went, the more connected I felt to something far greater than myself. Every fiber of my soul vibrated with energy. I felt pure love, undiluted and all-encompassing. It wasn't just coming from Jesus. It was coming from the very fabric of existence. Suddenly, the tunnel widened, and I found myself standing in what could only be described as heaven. It wasn't clouds or golden gates. It was light and energy. I could see fields of green stretching beneath skies, shimmering with colors I had never seen before. Flowers hummed with sound. Rivers of light flowed through the air. And there, in the center of it all, stood Jesus. He smiled at me and said, "Come." I followed him as we walked, and the light around us pulsed with life. I could feel the heartbeat of creation beneath my feet. Jesus stopped, turned toward me, and said, "Lily, there is something you need to understand. A hidden truth that has been buried for centuries." Jesus reached out his hand, and when I took it, a flood of images filled my mind. I saw ancient African tribes, shamans, and healers standing in circles of light. I saw black men and women singing, praying, and performing rituals. Their energy was powerful, connected to the earth and the spirit in a sacred way. Jesus said, "The black people of this world were given a gift, a spiritual strength that runs deeper than human understanding. This strength was meant to lead humanity into spiritual awakening, but it was stolen from them." I saw the transatlantic slave trade, the chains, the whips, the families torn apart. But even in their suffering, there was light. Jesus showed me how this spiritual strength was passed down through generations. Even when the world tried to erase it, they tried to bury this power, he said, but it's awakening again. He showed me visions of black communities rising in strength, reclaiming their spiritual identity. I saw healers, prophets, and spiritual leaders guiding the world into a new era. "Tell them it's time," he said. When Jesus spoke to me about the hidden power within black people, his voice carried both urgency and compassion. He looked at me with such intensity that I felt my whole being tremble. "Lily," he said, "what I'm about to show you is a truth that has been buried for centuries. It was hidden, not by accident, but through intentional oppression. But now is the time for it to be revealed." He extended his hand toward me, and the moment I touched it, a flood of images filled my mind. I saw ancient African lands, lush, vibrant, alive with spiritual energy. I saw men and women standing in circles beneath the stars, chanting and praying. Their voices blended together in perfect harmony, vibrating through the earth itself. They weren't just performing ritual. They were channeling spiritual energy. The ground beneath them pulsed with light as their hands lifted toward the heavens. These people, Jesus said, were connected to God in a way that few others have ever been. They knew how to speak to the earth, how to heal with their hands, and how to hear the voice of the Spirit. They were entrusted with a sacred gift, a gift of creation, intuition, and spiritual insight. But then the vision shifted. I saw ships coming across the ocean, chains, whips, and the cracking of human spirits. I saw families torn apart, their names, languages, and spiritual practices stripped away. But even through the suffering, the light remained within them. It didn't fade, even when everything else was taken. Jesus' voice softened as he said, "The enemy knew the strength of these people. That's why they were targeted. Their power wasn't just physical, it was spiritual. The world feared what would happen if that power was unleashed. He showed me how systems were built to suppress this spiritual inheritance. The education system, the economic system, and even the religious institutions were structured to keep the black community from rediscovering their true strength. He showed me how even the teachings of Christianity had been twisted, used as a tool of control rather than liberation. But then, I saw something incredible. The light that had been buried for so long was beginning to rise. I saw young men and women stepping into spiritual authority, praying, healing, and leading others toward truth. Jesus smiled and said, "The awakening has begun." He added, "The chains are breaking, the power that was hidden is being restored, and the world will be changed because of it." Jesus' face grew somber as he showed me the truth behind the oppression of black people. It wasn't just about slavery. It was about spiritual warfare. The enemy had recognized the power that resided within them. From the beginning, the goal was to suppress it. I saw the early days of the transatlantic slave trade, African men and women being shackled and loaded onto ships like cargo. Their faces were etched with fear and confusion. But as the ships moved across the ocean, I saw something else: light. Despite their suffering, many of them were still praying. Their faith was unshaken, even as their bodies were broken. They tried to take their freedom, Jesus said, but they couldn't take their connection to me. Then, I saw how the systems of oppression evolved. It wasn't just about physical chains anymore. It became about mental and spiritual chains. I saw how slave owners would read the Bible to enslaved people, but they only read selected passages about obedience and submission. They twisted God's word into a tool of control. They used my name to justify their cruelty. Jesus said, "They taught lies in my name, but I was never with them. I was with the ones who prayed in the fields. I was with the ones who whispered my name beneath the stars." I saw how even after slavery was abolished, the oppression continued. Segregation, discrimination, poverty. Each of these things was designed to keep the black community from stepping into their spiritual inheritance. Jesus showed me how the criminal justice system, the economic structure, and even the media were tools used to keep this power hidden. But Jesus smiled softly and said, "The enemy underestimated the resilience of these people. They survived, they endured, and now the time has come for them to rise." He showed me how this awakening was already beginning. I saw young black men and women stepping into positions of spiritual authority, leading churches, organizing communities, and rediscovering the power of prayer and fasting. I saw a generation that was no longer accepting the lies of the world, but reclaiming their divine identity. "The chains are breaking," Jesus said, "not just the physical chains, but the mental and spiritual chains as well. The power that was buried is rising to the surface. The world is not ready for the strength that is about to be unleashed." After showing me the oppression, Jesus' tone changed. His eyes softened, and he smiled. "Lily," he said, "do you want to see the truth about the power that was hidden?" I nodded, and suddenly, the visions changed. I saw ancient African lands once again, but this time, they were filled with light and celebration. I saw men and women standing in circles, their hands lifted toward the sky. Their mouths were moving, not in words, but in sounds that carried energy. "These sounds," Jesus said, "are not just words, they are frequency." The people of this land knew how to command creation through sound, Jesus explained. Their voices carried spiritual authority. I saw healers placing their hands on the sick, and the sick were instantly made well. I saw prophets speaking, and the ground itself responded. Plants grew, and animals gathered near. Jesus smiled and said, "They knew the secrets of creation, because they were directly connected to me." He showed me how this power was passed down through generations, even when they were taken from their lands. This gift remained. It showed up in music, in the rhythm of drums, and in the melody of spiritual. It showed up in the strength of grandmothers who prayed over their families, in the resilience of leaders who fought for justice. But Jesus showed me how this power had been buried beneath pain, oppression, and distraction. They were taught to forget, he said, but the power never left. It's still within them. Then, he showed me the present day. I saw young men and women waking up, praying, fasting, and rediscovering the connection to God that had been hidden for so long. The awakening has already begun, Jesus said. I asked Jesus why this gift had been hidden for so long. His expression grew serious. Because the enemy feared it, he replied, this power isn't just about strength, it's about spiritual leadership. The Black community was meant to guide the world spiritually. Their ability to connect with God, to see beyond the physical world, and to move through faith was a divine gift. The world wasn't ready for that kind of authority. He paused, then added, so they tried to destroy it. I saw how colonialism, slavery, and systemic oppression were carefully designed to prevent this awakening. If they could keep these people focused on survival, Jesus said, they could stop them from realizing who they really are. But Jesus smiled and said, they failed. The awakening has begun. The strength of these people is rising. The wisdom of the ancestors is returning. I saw visions of the future, young Black leaders standing at the forefront of a global spiritual movement. I saw communities united through prayer and faith. I saw miracles happening, healing, deliverance, and breakthrough. This is why the enemy fought so hard to keep it hidden, Jesus said, because once they remember who they are, nothing will be able to stop them. After Jesus revealed why the power within the Black community had been hidden for so long, he showed me how it was now being restored. His eyes softened as he smiled warmly and extended his hand once more. Lily, he said, what you are about to see is already happening, but it is only the beginning. Suddenly, I was surrounded by light. The visions came quickly, like flashes of truth being downloaded straight into my soul. I saw a young Black woman standing in a small room, her hands raised in prayer. Her face was radiant, her eyes closed as she prayed with intensity and authority. The room began to vibrate with energy as her words filled the air. It was as if heaven itself was responding to her prayers. I watched as people entered the room sick and left healed. I saw hearts that had been hardened by years of pain suddenly softened in her presence. Then, I saw a young Black man in a crowded city street, speaking to a group of people. He wasn't yelling or performing. His words carried a weight that could be felt in the air. People were drawn to him, not because of his charisma, but because of the authority in his voice. It wasn't human authority, it was spiritual. His words were breaking chains, opening hearts, and awakening something deep within the people listening. Jesus' voice came softly. Do you see? The power is returning. What was buried is rising to the surface. They are remembering who they are. I saw churches filled with Black men and women standing in worship, their hands raised toward the heavens. But this wasn't just emotional. It was spiritual warfare. I saw chains breaking in the spirit realm as they sang. Strongholds were collapsing, and generational curses were being shattered. The light that had been dimmed for centuries was now blazing through them like fire. Then Jesus showed me the creative restoration happening. I saw Black artists creating music, writing books, and painting masterpieces that carried spiritual power. Their creativity wasn't just artistic, it was prophetic. Their art was unlocking hearts, stirring soul, and reconnecting people with the divine. I saw healers using natural remedies and ancient wisdom passed down through generations. I saw hands being placed on broken bodies and broken hearts, and both were being healed. Jesus smiled and said, this knowledge was never lost. It was stored away, waiting for the right time to return. Then I saw the economic restoration. Black-owned businesses were flourishing. Black communities were becoming self-sufficient, no longer relying on broken systems to survive. They were building their own networks of trade, support, and education. Jesus' eyes narrowed with intensity as he said, the system that was built to keep them oppressed is crumbling beneath their feet. They are building something new, something that cannot be corrupted by greed or control. This is the restoration of divine order. As the visions faded, Jesus looked at me with kindness, but he warned, this restoration will not come without resistance. The enemy will try to stop it. That is why they must prepare. Jesus stepped closer to me, his presence radiating warmth and light. Lily, he said, there is one more thing you must understand. The restoration of this power will require unity. Suddenly, I was shown a series of images. I saw the Black community thriving but also fractured. I saw division, political, religious, and generational. I saw people turning against one another over differences in opinion, beliefs, and background. But then, I saw how those divisions were healed. Jesus showed me small gatherings of people sitting together in prayer, speaking honestly with one another. I saw men and women laying down their pride and opening their hearts to each other. I saw forgiveness being exchanged. Old wounds that had lingered for generations were being healed. This is the key, Jesus said. The enemy has tried to divide them because he knows their power comes from unity. A single flame can be extinguished, but a wildfire cannot. He showed me a vision of Black men and women standing together, hands clasped, their eyes focused upward, their mouths moving in prayer. A wave of light moved through them, spreading outward in all directions. That light consumed the darkness surrounding them. Then I saw a vision of the future. Black communities leading global movements of spiritual awakening. I saw them praying over world leaders. I saw them healing nations through faith and wisdom. I saw them standing boldly against corruption and greed, refusing to be manipulated by the systems of the world. Jesus smiled and said, "They will become a light to the nations, but only if they remain united." Then he showed me something that shook me deeply. I saw how the enemy would try to stop this unity. I saw media narratives stirring up division, political leaders encouraging conflict, and even some religious leaders sowing seeds of doubt and confusion. The enemy will use deception, Jesus said. He will try to convince them that they are too different, too broken, too damaged to unite. But those are lies. Their strength comes from their shared identity, both as descendants of powerful ancestors and as children of God. I saw how this unity would extend beyond race. I saw people from all backgrounds being drawn to the spiritual leadership of the Black community. The strength, resilience, and wisdom they carried would become a beacon for others seeking truth. Jesus' voice was filled with authority as he said, "Tell them to lay down their pride and come together in faith." Division is the enemy's tool, but unity is God's weapon. Jesus' expression softened as he said, "Unity cannot happen without forgiveness." I suddenly saw a young Black woman sitting alone in a dark room, her face streaked with tears. She was holding a Bible, but her hands were shaking. I could feel her pain, betrayal, bitterness, anger. Then I saw Jesus sitting beside her, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. "Forgive them," he said softly. She shook her head, tears falling faster. "I can't," she whispered. "You can," Jesus replied, "because I will help you." I watched as Jesus took her hand, and a soft light flowed through her body. Her breathing slowed, her tears stopped, and she closed her eyes, whispering, "I forgive them." Suddenly, the darkness around her lifted, and light flooded the room. The chains around her heart were broken. "Forgiveness is not weakness," Jesus said. "It is strength. It is the key to unlocking their power." He then showed me visions of people reconciling, fathers who had abandoned their families, returning to their children, mothers embracing daughters after years of silence, siblings speaking words of apology and forgiveness. The weight that had pressed down on the Black community for centuries was being lifted, not through retaliation, but through forgiveness. Jesus spoke with tenderness. "Tell them that forgiveness does not excuse the wrongs done to them, but it frees them from the burden of carrying that pain. Only when they forgive will they be able to step fully into their power." Jesus' expression became intense. He said, "Lily, you must tell them they need to prepare now." I saw a wave of darkness approaching. It wasn't physical, it was spiritual. The enemy was angry. The awakening had begun, and the forces of darkness were preparing to strike back. But I also saw a shield of light surrounding the Black community. It wasn't fragile, it was impenetrable. This shield wasn't formed by wealth or political power, it was formed by faith, unity, and obedience to God. "Tell them," Jesus said, "to strengthen their faith, to study my word, to fast and pray, to build communities of trust and accountability. Prepare for resistance, but not with fear, with confidence. Jesus stepped closer, his eyes burning with divine authority. "Tell them to rise." I saw young black men and women standing up, their eyes filled with light. I saw churches overflowing with people hungry for truth. I saw healing services where people were miraculously cured. I saw leaders stepping into positions of influence, not because of politics, but because of spiritual strength. "This is their time," Jesus said, "but they must be ready." After Jesus gave me the call to action, he said, "Lily, now I will show you what will happen if they rise." His eyes shone with a mixture of power and tenderness as he raised his hand. Suddenly, the world around me changed. I was no longer standing beside Jesus. Instead, I was hovering above the earth. I saw entire cities, nations, and continents. But they weren't as they are now. They were different. The skies were clearer, the air charged with peace, and the energy of the planet felt lighter, calmer, and more balanced. There was no sense of fear or conflict. There was peace. Then I saw them, black men and women standing at the forefront of this new era. They were leading, not through force or dominance, but through wisdom, grace, and spiritual authority. Their presence carried weight. They didn't need to raise their voices to be heard. People simply listened. I saw a woman standing on a stage, addressing thousands of people. She wasn't a politician or a celebrity. She was a spiritual leader. Her words carried power because they came from a place of truth. She wasn't speaking from human wisdom. She was speaking from divine revelation. The crowd was hanging on her every word, and I saw people in the audience falling to their knees, tears streaming down their faces as they experienced spiritual breakthroughs. Then I saw a young black man standing in a government office. He wasn't there to play politics. He was there to bring truth and righteousness. People around him were drawn to his integrity. They sought his counsel, not because of his position, but because of the spiritual authority he carried. He made decisions not based on strategy, but on prayer and discernment, and those decisions brought healing to the nation. I saw healing on a massive scale. I saw hospitals emptying because people were being healed supernaturally through the laying on of hands. I saw communities once broken by poverty now thriving. Schools were filled with children who weren't just being educated, but were being taught spiritual truths. Jesus' voice echoed softly, "The restoration will not be partial, it will be complete." Then I saw something even more powerful. I saw a global awakening. Other nations began to follow the example set by the black community. Spiritual leaders from every continent were gathering together in unity. I saw white leaders, Asian leaders, indigenous leaders, and leaders from all backgrounds standing side by side with black leaders. But it was the black leaders who were carrying the torch. They were guiding others into truth, not from a place of dominance, but from a place of spiritual strength and humility. Then I saw miracles. I saw the blind receiving sight. I saw people being healed of diseases that doctors couldn't explain. I saw financial systems shifting as communities began to trade and operate independently of corrupt government. Jesus smiled and said, "Do you see, Lily? This is the future that awaits them if they are willing to embrace it." But then his face darkened. "Now I must show you what will happen if they do not rise." The light around me dimmed, and suddenly I saw another vision. This time I saw chaos. I saw riots in the streets, governments collapsing, and nations falling into conflict. I saw the rise of a new global system, one that promised peace but delivered control. People were lining up to receive digital implants, trading their freedom for security. I saw the black community under attack, not physically, but spiritually. They were being lured into division and confusion. The power they carried was still there, but it was being misused, distorted, and corrupted. Jesus' voice was firm. "This is what the enemy wants. If they do not rise in unity, the enemy will exploit their division and steal their power." Then the vision faded. I was back, standing before Jesus. His eyes were intense. "Tell them," he said. "Tell them that the choice is before them. Division will lead to destruction. Unity will lead to victory." Jesus' eyes burned with divine authority as he spoke. "Tell them to rise." I saw young black men and women stepping forward, their eyes filled with determination. I saw churches filled with people, hunger for truth in their hearts. I saw leaders rising in spiritual strength, not out of politics, but because of their connection to God. This is their time, Jesus said, but they must be ready. As the vision of their rising continued, the world around me seemed to shift. I saw the transformation, a world where peace was no longer a distant dream, but a reality. Nations healed, communities restored, and the black community leading the way. The power that was hidden for so long was finally coming to light, and the world would be forever changed. Jesus smiled, his face full of love and hope. The time has come, he said, and with unity, nothing can stop them.